Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Far Out Wisdom podcast. And I hope that everybody's having a wonderful day. And remember to breathe and relax. And I know that this is going to be a very good advice for someone like me who has been dealing with a lot of anger issues, especially during the election with everything that's going on at the moment. But like I said, it's just I'm all cool about it. If Trump wins, Trump wins. If Biden wins, Biden wins. But in this episode, I had two of my smart, nerdy friends, Mccall Jones and Melissa Meach. Mccall Jones is, he was a former producer at North Communications. He studied international relations at Dublin City University. And he studied creative writing at Emerson College. He went to Boston Tech High. Pretty smart dude. I think he has a master's degree or a PhD in international relations. I'm not really sure. And Mccall, if you're listening to this, my bad. And you can hopefully I'll get all the information down below and I'll correct it as well. And I also had Melissa Meach. She has an AS in management for technical profession with an emphasis with multicultural management, a BA in business administration, and a master's in international management. So this conversation is about the Biden and Harris administration, and I get it with the polarization with the current political situation. I decided to have these two to come on and have a conversation about pretty much everything under the sun, especially histories. I really hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And remember, guys, to share, like, love, rate, do what you got to do, and especially sending donation will help File grow. And as always, guys, stay far out. Bye. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Far Out Wisdom podcast. I'm with Melissa and Mccall Jones. And today we're going to be talking about the Biden-Harris administration, which is going to be interesting. I call it Beijing Biden, so that's what I'm going to say. So, Melissa, could you, I know that everybody knows you already, could you introduce yourself to the FOW people, the FOW audience?
I hate introducing myself. I'm Melissa. I just know a whole bunch of random stuff that is interesting. So if you ever want to hear something interesting, I'm the person to speak with.
And let alone she has a lot of college degrees.
I do.
And then we have Mccall Jones, and he hasn't been on FOW for quite some time. The last time he was here, it was back in, I believe, in the summer. So Mccall, welcome back to FOW, and could you introduce yourself to the universe?
I can. Thank you. It's actually good to be back. I hope you can hear me just fine. I just have, like Melissa, I just have a pile of degrees, and mine happen to be in international relations, and I specialized in U.S. foreign policy and national security.
Ooh, so spicy.
So as far as what is, going on currently and the continuities that I see, politically that are going on now, as well as the inconsistencies and actually a lot of the players, not only am I familiar with a lot of either the institutions or the individuals, but I'm familiar with them going back decades. So hopefully that knowledge will come to bear and be useful, at least a little bit in this conversation.
So, interesting fact, my degree isn't in international relations, but it's in international development. So,
oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the obviously foreign policy and stuff is something that is important in that aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
So the election just happened, guys, and I'm trying to get information about the election, but at the same time, I'm really confused because Facebook has their own fact checker. I got banned for 3 days because I shared a map from the Epoch Times.
You beat me by 2 days.
Yeah, I was back, and I got shadow banned in the process of doing that. So I'm on, like Melissa and I were talking about earlier, before we start recording. I'm trying to get information as much as I can, but I don't know what's going on because Facebook's saying Biden won. And then at the same time, when I'm on Parler and stuff, and I'm looking at the Epoch Times, the Washington Times, the National Review, and all that good stuff, they're like, Trump is still, in court and stuff like that. So I believe right now, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Excuse my French, but the fact checkers are fact checking me, and then I don't even know what's going on. So do you guys feel the same thing I'm feeling? Because I'm getting frustrated. And I'm just about to just stop with politics altogether because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the mainstream, the lamestream media. Yeah.
Right.
I'm tired of them.
What do you think, Melissa?
The bottom line is your vote doesn't really matter in the grand scheme.
I'm in California, so our vote doesn't matter.
No, and a lot of people don't understand this is that right now Trump still has a way to victory. Whether you want to choose it or not. It has nothing to do with cheating. It has nothing to do. Our Constitution is set up to promote a two-party system. And Trump has managed to figure out a way to bypass that two-party system, which I didn't think was even possible, but he has. So he's basically using the courts to hold up the electors. The only votes that matter in the end is the electoral college votes. That's right. The only votes that matter in the end. If Biden can't get to, what is it again? 270, then it goes to the House delegation. If it goes to the House delegation, Trump wins. Period, point blank. Unless the Democrats can convince some establishment Republicans to side with them, Trump takes the victory. So if Trump can ensure that Biden doesn't get to 270 and then it has to go to House delegation, Trump wins. That's his only path to victory right now. But the fact checkers aren't telling. This is what happens when people don't understand how the election process works.
Right.
So in January 6th, if Biden doesn't get sworn in and Trump gets sworn in, a lot of people are going to be pissed.
Nobody's getting sworn in on January 6th.
Or what is it, January 7th? I don't know.
20th.
That's what date it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, so a lot of people are going to end up being pissed. That's all I got to say.
Well, there's going to be a lot of people pissed either way. It's just matters who gets to be pissed. I agree with most of what you said. I was a little bit sort of confused at the beginning of what you said, in a sense that you said that Trump has bypassed the constitutional process. In my observation, he's actually following the constitutional process and following the procedures that are laid out. And even your conclusion that it would fall to the legislatures that would cast a single vote per state is indeed held up by the Constitution. In fact, that process is laid out in the Constitution, and that's why it is there as a stopgap, if you will. And you're absolutely right. Currently, the majority of governors in the U.S. right now, I think, 28 or 29? I forget the actual total, but there's a majority of the governorships in states hold a Republican majority as it relates to one legislature, one vote.
Let me clarify myself. I don't mean that he's not following the Constitution. He is, but the system itself is set up to promote a two-party system, Republicans and Democrats.
Okay.
Historically, it's always promoted that two-party systems. Third parties can't get in there. It's obviously it's legal for them to get in there, but because of the way the system is designed and that 270 minimum, it's hard for a third party to win. When I look at Trump, I don't see him as a Democrat or a Republican. I don't know what to call him. He is a brand new party.
Yes.
He is not establishment Republican. He is not establishment Democrat. He's not a progressive. He is this new party that I've never seen. And so when I say he's bypassed the system, I'm looking at him as a third party getting in there and finding and using the system to his benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that clarifies things. And what would you define as his benefit?
Using, instead of bypassing that popular vote portion of it and trying to get it directly to House delegation, which has it happened like only one time in history or two times or something like that?
I believe it was once. Yeah, I forget when.
Yeah. So it's something that's, a little more rare where the House delegation decides who the president is. Most people don't even know about that step.
Right. And I'll even jump back on something that you said sort of at the top, and I agree with you that actually what both of you said, and we are observing, depending on who we're listening to, we are observing two completely different universes of information.
Right.
Because if I listen to the NPRs of the world or any left-leaning voice, the election's over. Biden will be sworn in on January 20th, and we're going to get on to resurrecting something in the world. And on the other side, if you listen to the YouTubers, the prominent, political YouTubers, the Tim Pools of the world, et cetera,
right?
The election is far from over. It is a heavily and hotly contested, not so much outcome, but investigations into the violations or claimed violations of the procedure and the process. And I see very little reporting of that on the left-leaning sides. In fact, what I have seen most of is, claims are being made, but they are baseless, that there's no evidence, that there's no rationale for the claims that they're making. They're just wasting time. They're just throwing tantrums. Conspiracy theories. Yet I'm hearing from former and retired military officers who are now data scientists, explaining in very articulate and specific terms the nature of the discrepancies that they're seeing in terms of data aggregation patterns, in terms of the how those patterns do not line up naturally, how many patterns within the election do add up and line up naturally, and specifically the ones between Biden and Trump fall well outside the bounds of vote tallies, as they tend toward natural curves, and there's multiple violations of these natural curves, leaving everyone, to scratch their heads.
Right.
There are sources who are stating that there has been direct tampering. There's other people who have said that there has been indirect tampering. I've read multiple stories all around the country of multiple individuals, no sign of a larger group per se, but multiple individuals who have actually been arrested and in some cases have admitted to voter fraud. And some of these individuals have been able to cast upwards into the thousands of fraudulent ballots just on their own. So to claim that there's been no evidence is a reach. To claim that there's been no sustained conspiracy, while it may be true, the evidence is not completely tallied at this point. So there's certainly reason for suspicion. The Pennsylvania vote that had been certified was decertified by a judge there, saying that these anomalies, these puzzlements, these unnatural curves, et cetera, and also the observers being very cleanly and deliberately and overtly restricted from actually observing the actual votes.
You're talking about the Republicans, right? Not the Democrats, the Republicans that were...
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not aware that there were any Democrats that were barred from the counts.
Right.
I think the Giuliani hearing last week was actually very dramatic in terms of what it presented and what its implications are. And that was exactly the intention of it. So in that regard, I believe it was both strategic and a tactical move that I believe was ultimately not something that could be rationally ignored. Let's look at it that way.
Right. Like when I don't. Oh, sorry, Melissa. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so basically, Trump and Giuliani and Trump's team doesn't have to prove there was fraud. All you have to do is cast enough doubt where all they have to do is cast enough doubt. Well, first, they have to ensure that the electors, that Biden doesn't get to 270.
Well, he's already passed 270, but it's trying to hang on to it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, come when it's time for the electoral college to happen. What is that, December 14th?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
He has to ensure that Biden doesn't hit that 270 during the electoral college. Mm-hmm. Once he does that, if he can get it over to House delegation, he doesn't have to prove anything in court. All he has to do is cast enough doubt, right, and get enough Republicans to say, I can't certify. Even if the electors certify, to my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, even if all the electors, even if Biden hits that 270, if the House delegation refuses, or whoever refuses to certify this, Trump could still take it, right? Or refute, or what? I don't know the technical terms for this. I'm sorry. Questions the vote. If Congress questions the vote and refuses the electors because they're like, we can't accept these elector votes because there's too much doubt. Mm-hmm. Trump can still take it, right?
Well, it depends on where it falls. I mean, it'll go back to the states, and they will cast a vote. And if there's any contest among the states, it'll then go back to I believe the Senate, where the final vote will ultimately take place. So there's still several levels of which for it to go.
And so what happened, like with when I was watching the votes? I don't know about you guys. I was on it. When I was at work, I was watching the entire thing, and it was Fox News. I had Fox News up, and for some odd reason, something happened when everybody was asleep. Okay. And I believe I don't remember what it was. I think it was Wisconsin. When I was watching, I was watching the maps, and Trump was leading. And then when I woke up to go pee pee right in the middle of the night, I'm like, wait a minute, something happened. It was like a straight line. It was like I'm sorry, it wasn't Washington. It was Michigan, not Washington. Wisconsin. It was Michigan.
You saw the same pattern in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in all the swing states. You saw that same pattern going up for Biden, just a straight shot up.
Mm-hmm. It was like, and I remember I shared a meme, and you guys probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to link it down below. But it was like, I posted a meme where they were like jumping over, and then just Biden just goes up like randomly. And a lot of people make the argument that it was last minute votes that was getting counted in.
That's what
and you see, the thing is, I totally understand what the left are trying to say. They're like, it's a conspiracy theory, but these are the same fucking people with the Russian Gate conspiracy for 4 fucking years that we have been hearing.
Mm-hmm. Here's my problem with that mail-in vote argument too, that I haven't actually heard anybody bring up. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of the older population, like my parents, right, who's actually scared of COVID and want to do mail-in voting, no matter what Trump said, right? They wanted to do mail-in voting. Older people tend to be what? Conservative.
Right.
So that's another concern, that you shouldn't have seen a straight shot up like that, especially in areas like Arizona. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because the older population there will have a tendency to vote, even if they're voting by mail, they'll have a tendency to vote for conservative. My parents voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with my mom.
They mailed in their ballots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing with my mom. Yeah. Because she's scared of COVID too. And I mailed in my ballots because not the fact that I'm scared of COVID, it's because I'm fucking lazy. So
you have a bowl cut to maintain, so I understand. Right. That breeze, would ruin it.
I'm gonna have to remove my bowl cut because all the SJW Antifa members having the same haircut as me. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna grow up now.
No, but at least you just tell them that they are culturally appropriated.
Yes, exactly. And you're brown enough to get away with it.
Right.
And I'm talking to the audience right now. Letting you guys know that we are 3 people of color. Okay, Trump won. I don't remember the numbers. I wish I could just Google you that. I think he got more black votes this year than he did in 2016.
Indeed, he did. Yes.
Yeah, and so this whole narrative that I'm hearing at the moment, it's like, especially from the left,
and Latino votes. I will add to that.
Right, and little I think I was like listening to, I think it was like Sargon of Akkad talking to like Destiny, and Destiny was like, Trump is going to lose Florida, and for some fucking odd reason, something flipped, and it was all red. And if you guys look at the map that Google provides, you're telling me that a guy who can't even fucking talk straight, who hides in his basement, beat Trump. I just can't believe that shit. And I know, I totally understand. A lot of people are like, you probably, you hate Biden and stuff. And I have all means to dislike Biden. Okay. And we're going to talk about it. I think McCall knows a lot about the Obama and Biden administration, what they did, especially with the Yemen genocide that happened. But it's like, you're telling me that a dude who's like, come on, man, beat fucking Trump. I just can't believe it, guys. I don't know if you guys feel the same way that I do, but when I look at the map, it's literally red. Mm-hmm. Majority of it, it's like red. Right. I mean, California is always going to be blue. I mean, California is just, that's, we're going to be blue, but at the same time, we did have a lot of Trump supporters here in the Central Valley. I don't know about you. Where are you at, McCall?
I'm in Los Angeles, so of course that wasn't. Trump. But further south in Orange County, it was definitely red. So there you go. Right.
So Trump went up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to dovetail, Melissa, on what you were suggesting earlier regarding the need to prove that there was fraud. In fact, while the administration has been publicly screaming fraud, none of the lawsuits currently have anything to do with fraud.
Because they have a hard time proving it in court.
Well, there's basically, that's correct on that front. But beyond the claim of fraud, they themselves haven't really found currently, or at least, to date of last week, the majority of evidence that they found have really been procedural abnormalities and things that directly violate the law, either state law or the Constitution specifically. So for example, in Pennsylvania, and I believe in I want to say Michigan, and forgive me if I don't have that right, but definitely in Pennsylvania, the dynamic that the governor ultimately changed the window inside which people could vote was a violation of the Constitution. In that it's the only power enunciated via the Constitution to have any say over what happens for a vote is the actual state legislatures, and it's very specific that it's that body exclusively. So if anybody else, be it a court, be it a governor, or even individual politician for that matter, by vote or by mandate, is a direct constitutional violation. So that's largely what Giuliani and his team have been pursuing, have been very, in my opinion, severe and, if you will, overt constitutional violations, which, while there really probably isn't much of a precedent for it, the foresight that the founding fathers had to include such a thing really makes this a significant violation. If states have gotten so far away from their own awareness of constitutional procedure, I think that speaks to other types of decay that I really do think that we need to take quite seriously.
Not 100% agree.
The thing that's really scary though, it's is I'm in left wing groups too. I'm not really radicals. I'm not talking about like the Antifa or anything like that. But the thing that's really scary to me is that the tribalism is getting really, it's not really bad, but it's becoming horrible and really kind of a disappointment, because even if there isn't or is, I'm not saying, we don't know, we don't have much information yet. But the thing is that scares me the most is that when something needs to be investigated, especially when it comes to our election, the importance of it, of having a democratic election, is that the left, they're like, oh, it doesn't exist. You guys are just, shitting out fucking conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we allow them for 4 years to waste money on the Russian Gate conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. So why not give us a chance? okay, and kind of see what's going on with the abnormalities. So I forgot to ask a question earlier to you, McCall. What is an example of abnormalities that happen?
Are you saying amoralities?
No, what happened with what are things that were suspicious, basically, that happened?
Abnormalities, as far as the election is concerned. Well, I spoke about quite a bit of it. One of which, the abnormality would be just the constitutional violation and the change of procedures. The actual move, generally speaking, to mail-in ballots by itself is a high level of abnormality in the sense of it's well known that it literally invites a high degree of fraud. Now, I couldn't tell you that high means 8% or 10% or 30%, but it is a known concept that politicians on both the left and the right, not to mention politicians abroad, are crystal clear that mail-in ballots are inherently problematic and inherently insecure. In fact, in some countries, it's not even allowed. So those two, the procedural as well as the abnormality of the mail-in ballots themselves. And I'll also be clear as well that there's a difference between absentee ballots and the mail-in ballots. And the mail-in ballots are actually a separate franchise, if you will. An absentee ballot requires that you request it, and that somewhere along the way you provide a signature of some kind, and then because you've requested it, that absentee ballot comes to you, you fill it out, you sign it, you send it back in. There is actually a chain of custody that can be followed with that absentee ballot. In contrast, a mandatory, if you will, mail-out ballot, which is specifically what California had, for example, they just took every single individual in their massive database of registered voters, and they spit out a ballot and they stuck it in the mail. And the result of that was ultimately pretty obvious. You got people receiving multiple ballots. I mean, I personally could have voted at least twice based on the ballot, my own ballot that came in the mail, as well as myself walking up. And I ended up voting while at the booth. I didn't bring the ballot that I was mailed. I ended up voting provisionally according to them, and I'll cover that step of it shortly, as well as other people were receiving ballots that belonged to other people because they were being mailed to old addresses. Right. So if you wanted to be a person who used to live at your apartment and wanted to vote, you could fill that out and send it right in. So entirely plausible that at least every single person that received a vote, it's plausible that every single person who received a vote could have voted twice at a minimum. Right. I got a vote. Yeah. There you go. 2 ballots. Okay. So those, are dynamics of abnormalities. And the other legal team, what is her
Sidney Powell?
Sidney Powell. She's pursuing a very different set of abnormalities. She's pursuing the abnormalities that exist in the data itself. The abnormality that, as Mike Flynn was actually speaking about this morning on a podcast that he was on, that the vote count is actually being done outside the United States.
What?
Yes. That's the reason the servers, if you heard about it, were actually seized in Germany because the vote tallying is actually done outside the U.S. So there's already the potential for, data breach interruption right there. Secondly, the machines themselves are actually manufactured outside the United States. So that's already 2 points of potential and highly likely failure, along the way. Thirdly, the people that have had previous experience with both this company, the multiple vendors of the software, as well as the vote tallying process, are crystal clear. And these are people from both Cuba and Venezuela who claim to have firsthand knowledge of these machines and the technology. They're crystal clear. And the Philippines as well, actually, I will add to that, because I heard a politician in the Philippines also making this claim, that these machines were designed to completely control election outcomes, that any number of parameters can be set in any direction. And in addition to that, they are very easily hacked. So these machines fundamentally are just a complete nightmare from end to end. No matter what goes on, the likelihood of these of getting an honest tally is basically zero out of these machines. So that's just to name a few. And then, of course, when you start looking at the fact that 360,000 ballots came in at 3:43 a.m. on the morning of the 3rd, and that's what caused that vertical spike in votes, whereupon it was testified to that of those 330,000 votes that came in, only 3,200 of them were for Trump, while the remaining 358,000, were Biden votes. And subsequent to that, or subcategory to that, there are batches of votes. Actually, I'll mention two things, and then I'll shut my big fat mouth. There were batches of votes that appeared to be pristine, and which was very unusual. That the markings on the ballots were completely uniform, that there were no wrinkles or creases or any type signs of wear on any of these batches of ballots, which is highly unusual, since in most cases those ballots need to be folded and placed into their appropriate envelopes and then mailed into the counting center. So that's unusual. And also, too, they noticed that in hundreds of, and I forget what state this was. I want to say that it was, I won't say a state because I don't remember what state it was. But they found that within each batch of votes, the spread between Biden and Trump was exactly the same over the course of hundreds of batches of votes. So it might have been like 3.68%, but it was 3.68% in Biden's favor across like hundreds of batches. So a batch of votes, I don't know how many votes, ballots are actually in a batch, but they're loaded up into boxes and then they're, put in box by box. So to have that type of consistency, perfect consistency, it just speaks of something that's, problematic and highly irregular, and certainly an abnormality. And the list goes on. Every day we're getting more and more information as to the nature of those abnormalities and the malfeasance. From the voting officials at the polling places being nasty to the observers having to actually enforce their legal right to get in and see those ballots, which they still weren't really able to do. The revelation that a lot of these voting observers are not just, mom and pops that, had nothing to do that day. These people are actually data scientists. These people are actually quantitative analysis people. These people are actually physicists and mathematicians. So they understand data, and they understand what happens to data, and they understand the natural rhythms of data. And they've been at this professionally for decades. So this was by no accident that the people that were this qualified to observe were basically placed there to observe. And what they observed, literally, as stated by them, horrified them.
Right. And I see videos of people trying to go and vote, and they get like, oh, no, you can't come in here because of we are at our capacity due to COVID-19. And I had a friend of mine who she said that she had to look for a place to vote, but they didn't put their signs up that this is where you come in and vote. So you hear stories like that happening. And just like, I think Tim Pool said it perfectly. He was like, it's not widespread, because he has to say these type of things to save himself too, because YouTube might remove him for false information, And so to go back, I pulled up the Washington Examiner. We're talking about the countries that ban in ballot voting. It says that most developed countries, especially in Europe, ban mail-in voting to fight vast fraud and vote by buying that had threatened the integrity of their elections, according to the exhaustive review of voting rules and its histories in over 30 major nations. So in the European Union, 63% have put a ban on mailing in ballots, except for the citizens living overseas. So if they do it, how come we don't do it here in the United States of America? You know what I mean?
Well, we is very, very selective. What were you going to say, Melissa?
Is Melissa still with us?
I'm still here. I was on mute. I'm sorry. I was just listening to you guys. Oh. I wasn't going to say anything. Go ahead.
But it's like pretty much this is what we're talking about. Okay, look, I'm not good at math. I totally understand. All right, geometry. That's all I did. It's like I get it. But at the same time, even then, I have questions. And look, I'm gonna tell the audience, and I have left-wing friends who listen to my podcast. I totally understand. If Biden wins, by all means, hoorah! All right, Biden. All right, he's going to come into power with Harris. I totally understand. But at the same time, all I'm asking, or pretty much the Americans, 70 million Americans who voted for Trump want answers as well.
And
that's all I want. I want to know,
right.
because let's trace back to the 2016 elections and the irregularities there too. And I always question, because I'm sitting here like, Hillary Clinton could have taken a lot of those swing states, but the Democrats, I think Pennsylvania specifically, or I forgot exactly which state, Jill Stein was doing the count, and the Democrats sued for the count to stop.
What?
Hillary Clinton didn't want the count to continue, and I'm sitting here like, why? They were finding irregularities all over the place.
Right.
She sued what? She sued in Wisconsin, she sued in Michigan.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And all of the counting was forced to. The Republicans took her to the court. The Democrats took her to court. Everybody wanted the votes to stop.
Right.
So you look back at that election, you're like, okay, now it's time to figure out what is really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Period.
And I'll guarantee you that the only reason we're questioning those vote results or those actions now is because Hillary lost. If Hillary had in fact won, we would have never looked back. And the momentum to not look back would have been, accelerated and generated by the media that was more than happy to welcome, Hillary into the fold or back into the fold and move on.
Yeah, everybody was really ready for her to win. I voted for Hillary. All right, boo. I know.
Explain.
I don't like you anymore.
I'll foreshadow what I'll be getting at with Biden and Harris, but I'm crystal clear that anyone who actually voted for Harris or Biden or Hillary knew nothing about Biden or Harris or Hillary, because everyone that I know that wanted those three in had this set of priorities, politically and socially that they have in mind, and are completely unaware that those three people do not represent any of those values. And I found it, in a sense, laughable when people. In fact, I rarely post anything publicly in terms of political comment. But what I do, I try to make it. I try to say things that are as literally as objective and irrefutable as I can state them. So a long, long time ago, I said anybody who votes for Elizabeth Warren, or anybody who wants to vote for Elizabeth Warren, is a complete idiot. Because the only conclusion that I could come to was that they literally are the lowest of information voters who know nothing about what she wants.
I call BS. I'm going to say Bernie Sanders voters are the lowest information voters out there. Sorry.
No, I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't. Okay. I'm sorry. I just was referring specifically to Elizabeth Warren. Okay. I 100% agree with you. But I think that there are other contenders. But the Bernie voters are actually kind of an interesting anomaly. I find them to be actually, among voters, to be themselves stunningly intelligent, generally speaking. But you're right. They are objectively the lowest information voters that I've ever come across. And it's an anomaly that really kind of cracks me up. And I only believe that that's the case because they're a curious bunch. But they have very, very specific socialist aims, and they have basically socialist values, and they have, of course, been sucked into the Bernie machine. And they look at – I was stunned because I got to hang out with a bunch of them for a very long time around March. And what I observed was that they were very, very objective about everything else except Bernie.
Yeah.
They were objective about how the election was stolen from Bernie. They were objective about the problems with Trump, even though they weren't necessarily that informed about what Trump was actually doing. I found them to be amazingly astute on every other candidate and their foibles and their fallibilities. But the place that they literally had a complete and utter blind spot was around Bernie, and I found it fascinating.
What has Bernie accomplished, by the way? I'm sorry, Melissa.
Oh, in a word, nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, I said that all the time. Yeah. At least Biden accomplished the crime bill.
The crime bill. So basically, we've elected somebody who is literally one notch above Bernie in terms of being completely useless.
So I want to ask a question between you two. So you guys know about Biden and Bernie and all that stuff, but at the same time, how come they don't? So when I'm saying them, specifically, I'm talking about their voters, their group of people. Now I'm fascinated with the Yang gangs. Okay, Andrew Yang. But with Bernie and Biden, you guys voted back the fucking establishment into power. And at the same time, this is all Yang gang. So the philosophy they stand for is vote blue no matter who. And at the same time, I don't understand it because they're out in the streets, the Bernie bros. And let's admit it, guys. Okay, Antifa member are Bernie bros. Correct. And
there's no need to be sheepish about this. I mean, the people out shooting people have been consistently Bernie supporters. So, you know. Exactly. Just ask Mike Scalise.
Yeah, exactly. So these guys are like down with capitalism, fuck the fascists, you know, burn everything to the fucking ground. But then they put Biden in power. You know, like I see these Bernie bros talking about Biden being the change, bring America back to whatever. I don't know.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Go ahead. Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't think the Bernie bros voted.
You don't think so?
They wouldn't have voted for Biden.
You remember when?
If they did vote, they wrote in.
Yeah, probably, huh? So I was watching Project Veritas, and they had a Bernie bro, Bernie Sanders. I mean, McCall probably knows what I'm talking about. So Project Veritas not ambush, but they had this Bernie Sanders supporter. And he was talking about any means necessary to push Biden for their agenda. So I don't know what agenda they're talking about. Are they talking about AOC or are they talking about Bernie Sanders? Because AOC and Bernie Sanders, are kind of
They could care, and the sad part is they could care less about Bernie. Bernie for them is actually a tool, and they've actually made that quite clear. That Bernie was just the access that they needed to really push their genuinely radical, aggressive agenda forward. Bernie was merely the vehicle that they were willing to get behind because Bernie was the closest in terms of knocking at the door that they wanted to get into.
And that's how true Marxism works, is that you use the elites to gain the power. That's how real Marxism works.
Correct.
Working with the bourgeoisie, and just like just like I said, and I post many times before, if the corporations are on your side, guys, you guys are not the resistance.
Don't get me started.
I swear to God, God, these people, it really annoys the fucking shit out of me. Now, like I said, I'm a little Fukushima. I get really irritated easily, and so when I see these people. You know, McCall, you know what I'm talking about. You were at Straight Pride. You ever you see Antifa with their communist flag? They're fucking like flowing that shit. I don't get it because this is what I don't understand about the left nowadays is that you guys, you know, wave the hammer and sickle. I don't even think they know what they're doing, by the way. I see the rainbow hammer and sickle when obviously Stalin guys, they made a bill against gays. Che Guevara put homosexuals into concentration camps instead. And I believe, fact checking me on this, somebody, where it says that work will make men out of you. So he was saying that, you know, you're gay, you're not masculine. So I don't really understand you guys wearing your chest shirts.
Do you know that Marx and Engels went around using the N-word?
Right, and they were racist on top of it. Yeah, exactly what you're saying.
They did not. They said that if and I hate using the term minority because worldwide, we're not the minority.
Yeah.
But Marxism was specifically set up for Europeans. No other culture was supposed to be allowed into Marxism because Karl Marx believed that they would ruin it.
Correct.
Oh, Pol Pot proved that for sure. Oh, he did. He fucked it up. You guys know, like during the conversation, you don't hear, and I think McCall, you said it perfectly on our last podcast. I asked you, I said, you know, why are people not talking about the Vietnam War? And you go, because people are still alive and remember it. So that was a good. People. I talk about the Vietnam War. I'm fascinated by it.
Of course you do. Because you were next door, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my hand at it. I'd love to hear Melissa's hand at that answer to your question. But basically, I've observed that largely we're talking really not so much Democrats or leftists per se, but we're actually talking Marxists. It's a Marxist movement first and foremost, because the actual Democrats are establishment Democrats. The Pelosi's of the world are the Schumers, et cetera. They're all establishment people, so they don't really count as being of the left.
Right.
First and foremost. So what we're talking about fundamentally is a Marxist movement. And because most people are unaware of the prominence of Marxism in the United States, they kind of dismiss it as quite literally a conspiracy theory. And of course, any Marxist will also make the claim that any claim that Marxism has any power in the U.S. Is a conspiracy theorist. But upon examination, it becomes crystal clear that Marxism has dominated academia for the past 4 decades. It has dominated the high school levels for the past maybe 2 decades, and it now dominates the elementary school level maybe for the past decade and a half or so. If you look at the National Teachers Union, it is nothing but overt Marxism. If you look at Black Lives Matter, which they've actually overtly stated that they're Marxist, and people kind of poo-pooed like, oh, it's no big deal. But on their About page, which has since been magically removed, they were crystal clear that they were a Marxist movement, that they are anti-straight family, that they are anti-male. And once their opponents actually got wind of that page, and of course their overt statement that they intend to dismantle the heteropatriarchal family, once their opponents got wind of this, the word got around, and that page during that time magically disappeared. So to answer your question, fundamentally, you have to basically believe a list of things, but these are my top 3, and forgive me if I forget the third one. But the first one is you have to have absolutely no comprehension and awareness of economics. Number one, you have to have zero awareness and understanding of economics, and also it helps if you have no ability to do so. So economics is completely out, right?
Right.
The second thing that you have to possess is a complete and absolute disdain of history, because history is where facts live, and the left despises facts because those facts tend to be extremely inconvenient for them.
Right.
And thirdly, as I vaguely recall my own bloody list, is that you basically have to be unwilling to examine any information that is distinctly opposite or opposing your particular viewpoint. So if you take those three things into account, and you train people in at least those 3 values for 4, 5, 6 decades, you're going to end up with a group that is profoundly ignorant of history, profoundly ignorant of economics, and profoundly unwilling to debate or listen to anybody that has any information counter to what they might say, think, feel, or believe. And of course, elevating feelings above rationale is crucial among the leftists. So once you have that as a carefully cultivated demographic over the course of 50, 60 years, you get a very low information voter. You get someone who has been raised exclusively under the values of Marxism. And if you take a look, for example, at AOC, as well as Robert Reich, who both call themselves economists, what I have distilled it down to is they were raised and educated in basically the majority think of economics today, which is Marxist economics.
Right.
AOC was not raised under any type of capitalistic favoring or capitalistic valuing set of economics. She was raised exclusively under socialist economics because everything she says is socialist based, and she's passionate about it. So behind her is a lot of people who believe exactly the same thing. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us, they actually are only 7 to 8%. I would even go as high as 12% of the population, and most of them are under 25, which also underscores why the Democrats want to lower the voting age, because they get to harvest a whole new crop of even more low knowledge voters, or even greater in their realm of low votership, and as a result, they get to basically control and groom, quite literally, another crop of ignoramuses.
Right. And unfortunately, my dad was one of them. with Pol Pot. During that period of time, he was groomed into committing atrocities under the Pol Pot regime. So, Melissa, what were you saying? You were about to say something.
Oh, I completely 100% agree with you. I'm sitting here listening to, and just to go back to the Hillary Clinton and the Biden thing, they're corporatists. They're not Bernie people. That's why when I said the Bernie people didn't vote for corporatists, they are completely against corporatists. Those establishment Democrats, just like the never Trumper Republicans, they're corporatists. So I completely agree with you in the fact on the history thing. I hate the third thing too is science. They have to disregard science. And I always explain this to people all the time. Things like the 1619 Project stuff, these Marxist ideas that are being taught in schools. I'm sitting here like, who was the first Black slave owner in the United States? Does
Melissa,
anybody know?
Can you break down the 1619 Project for people who don't know, if you can?
There's really nothing to break down. It's based on a complete lie. Basically, they're saying that the United States started in 1619 when the first slave ship arrived. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Let me.
I think that's the basic foundation of it. It didn't start in 17. Why can't I remember the freaking date right now?
You're really bad at dates. Remember?
I told you that it didn't begin in 1776. It began in 1619 when the first slave ships arrived. That's my understanding of it. That's the foundation of the 1619 Project.
Yeah, let me see. But
here's the thing, though. Does anybody know who the first slave owner in the United States was?
Well, I know the race of that person. I don't know who it was, but I know the first slave owner in the United States was Black.
Anthony Johnson.
There you go.
What?
The first slave owner in the United States was a Black man. He had because there was a thing called indentured slaves, right? Anthony Johnson himself was an indentured slave. He bought himself. Black people and Europeans, they were Africans at the time. So Africans and Europeans, when they came to America, many of them were
Irish.
on equal, right. Many of them were on equal ground. They came here as indentured slaves. They bought themselves out of slavery, right? Because indentured servitude is far different than the slavery we know. So they bought, and then they were allowed to buy land. Anthony Johnson bought land. He had his own indentured slave. He had one Black man. The Black man went to Anthony Johnson's neighbor and said, "Hey, I've paid off my debt. Anthony won't release me." So Anthony
Kamala
Johnson,
Harris wasn't around back then.
Probably not. Probably not. So Anthony, the Anthony Johnson's neighbor had convinced him to let the Black indentured slave go. And then the neighbor, and I'm blanking out on the names right now, but the neighbor had offered the indentured slave work and said, "Okay, you can sign this contract with me, and now you're indebted to me." Well, Anthony Johnson got pissed. So he went back to court. He said, "That's my slave." And the courts ruled, this is all in court records, he was the first lifelong, at that point in time is when it was deemed that slaves were property.
Right.
Legally property. Lifelong slaves. That's the first slave owned in the United States, but nobody wants to talk about that.
Well, of course not, because the disdain of history, and like I said, history tends to be very inconvenient for leftists.
Right.
Right. So before we continue on with the Biden-Harris, what we think is going to happen, but recently there was a more like a Remembrance Day for Holodomor. So a lot of these communists, they always make the argument that Holodomor did not happen. A lot of people don't know about the Cambodian genocide. They don't know about Holodomor. They don't know about the Armenian genocide. They don't know any of that because of the fact that in school, you were only taught about the Holocaust. That's pretty much
Correct.
In the United States of America, that's what you learn. So Holodomor, it pretty much derived from, it really means to kill by starvation. And it's called the Tariff Famine, sometimes referred to the Great Famine. It was a famine in the Soviet Ukraine from 1932 to 1933 that killed millions of Ukrainians. So it's a Soviet famine. It was man-made by none other than Joseph Stalin. So every time I bring this up to the communists, they always justify his actions. So Elizabeth Heng was a Cambodian. She's a Cambodian Republican. She went against Jim Acosta here in Fresno, California, and she called out AOC and called her Pol Pot in her ad. Oh my goodness, it was horrible. AOC Pol Pot, what? You know, she was. Oh my god, she's so Elizabeth Heng. Elizabeth Heng was attacked. And so I came to the defense of Elizabeth Heng, and I got death threats by AOC fans. Guys, this is a party of compassion, and I care about the environment and the Amazon. So I drink recycles bamboo straws. These are the fucking people that claims to be fighting for social justice, just making worse for everybody else in the process.
They're on the right side of history, of course. So,
and that's pretty much, it's like, how come, like we were talking about fact checkers earlier, and Melissa was like, she hates the fact checkers, and I'm pretty sure most of us do. I call them the secret police. That's on Facebook.
They're not that secret.
It's like, when it comes to us, and us three, we're not even radical conservative. We're not even right wing. We're not KKK. We're three people of color.
Let me put a giant boot down on that one. The KKK was founded by the Democrats. It is a leftist phenomenon. It has always been a leftist phenomenon. So,
do we have a president that was a KK member, like a Klan member?
I'm sure we've probably had at least a few. Probably
we've had multiple.
But I'm just trying to clarify the dynamic of the KKK being right wing, in the same way that people try to claim that the Nazis were right wing, when neither of which is true, and demonstrably so. I mean, the KKK was founded by the Democrats to literally force and intimidate and murder black people so that they would stop voting Republicans. So there you have it.
They're trying to claim that the Boogaloo Boys are right wing, and I had to explain to him. I said, no, they're not. They're left wing. Their hero, their martyr, is the only white guy Black Lives Matter ever marched for. What's his name again? The guy that got shot. No knock warrant.
I forgot his name too.
I'm blanking out on his name right now, but Boogaloo Boys are a left wing militia. People need to quit calling them right wing. You can go on to Vice.com right now and watch
I said, Vice. Mm-hmm.
Vice, yes. You can go on to Vice.com right now. I think it's Vice. It's Vice or Vox. I'm pretty sure it's Vice.
Before you begin, Melissa, the Boogaloo movement, I brought it up on Wikipedia. It's the Boogaloo movement, whose adherents are often referred to as Boogaloo Boys or Boogaloo Boys, is a loosely organized far-right anti-government and extremist political movement in the United States. The movement has been described as a militia. Boogaloo and Harris, they are prepared to seek to incite a second American Civil War. So that's from Wikipedia. But you guys have to remember that Wikipedia is full of far leftists.
Fact checkers suck. You can go on to Vice.com right now. There is an hour-long documentary of them saying this is the Boogaloo Boys themselves saying they are a left-wing militia.
Right.
So I'm going to take Wikipedia over the group themselves. They literally march with Black Lives Matter and Antifa.
Right.
They recruit black people.
No, I didn't see that on the news. Are you sure?
Vice.
Vice. And I'm not, this isn't a right-wing it's Vice. That's if you're doing this documentary.
But think about it though. The Wikipedia page said anti-government. Isn't that like anarchism at the same time? I mean, isn't that left wing
or right? Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
You got the shoe horse theory. The shoe horse theory. Yeah, exactly. Far right, far left is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call them far right. So all I know about the Boogaloo Boys is that they wear Hawaiian shirts. That's all I.
Well, there's your clue, apparently.
So they wear little Hawaiian shirts, and I have a bunch of sometimes Boogaloo Boys on my profile. But they got removed, by the way. Majority of them that considered themselves Boogaloo Boys. And this is what we're talking about, guys. This is the whole thing, because we don't know what's factual and what it's not. And this is the postmodern bullshit attitude into our culture that's happening at the moment, because I don't know what is true and what is not. And just like Melissa said, that everybody needs to learn to think for themselves. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. But at the same time, I have to use like a third party type of, browser and pretty much look everything up, because Look, every time like I say something, they're like, it's a conspiracy theory. Like the whole, and I keep bringing this up, George Floyd, when he died, we were getting fucking gaslighted, and that pisses me off. And I remember, McCall, you were in LA and you had pictures of destroyed businesses, and we were getting gaslighted by the fucking media saying that, oh, it's a peaceful protest.
Right.
You know, it's bullshit. And I was like, you know, okay, what am I seeing? So I'm seeing like, you know, independent people. This is why Tim Pool should be back on the fucking ground, all right? but at the same time, he is getting threatened, and I don't think that's safe for him anyways. But he just should send reporters on the ground and to see what the heck is going on. I mean, I get it. I see right-wing people like on, you know, in these rallies and stuff like that. I totally understand. But we need independent news. And if Tim Pool brings something like Vice and like make something like Vice, he will pretty much like establish a new like empire of media.
Absolutely, he will.
Yep.
If he does, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't mind. Like I said, I'm very open about my friendship with Lydia. She is his, she's that chick that sits with him and pretty much Google his stuff.
Look, she's
you know what I mean? I told Lydia.
Chick, she's a goddess.
Oh, hey,
she's
real quick, you guys. Duncan Lemp. That's who their martyr is. Duncan Lemp, the only white boy BLM ever marched for. Duncan Lemp, but they're a far right-wing group, right? I just needed to add that.
Yeah, there we go.
Send me that information, Melissa, so I can link it down below, because I have a bunch of resources that I want to link down. So, but anyways, back to Tim Pool. We need people on the ground to pretty much record the entire thing, like what Vice used to do. Vice used to be like this fucking media empire that's some edgy shit. You know what I mean? Like, I really enjoyed like their documentaries that they did in North Korea. They even said in that documentary communist, but now Vice, they don't even want to say that word anymore. You know, they're like, I don't give a fuck about non-binary gender shit. I want to know what the fuck is going on the ground. You know what I mean? It's like they did a recent documentary in Cambodia about Hun Sen, and me and Melissa were Cambodian, so Hun Sen to us is just a fucking traitor to the Cambodian people and a strangle to democracy. We don't like him, that's for sure. And she was on the ground, this reporter, and she was just asking questions about people and just kind of get to know. That's the Vice that I like. Right. Now it's just I don't know what the fuck they're doing.
In my observation, you know, there's a very, I think, important cutoff to take note of, and I'm just theorizing this based on what you just said. That I'm an old dude, right? And I come.
We can't tell, McCall. We can't tell.
I come from a generation where we did research, and that research was through academic papers. That research was through, you know, perhaps other documentaries, and in many cases,
go to libraries.
Yeah, these things called the library, and actual books, and also I spent a lot of time speaking with people firsthand. Right. So, I believe that generationally speaking, I mean, you just said that, you know, you don't know what to believe. Well, fundamentally, you know, I got as much information firsthand as I possibly could. And then I read enough of a body of information so that I could begin to parse out what was either kind of true, not true, or what I could conclude was most probably true, while maintaining that skepticism. But I don't see that type of endurance among the younger generations that should otherwise be doing, you know, this type of research. So I understand their skepticism about incoming information because they believe that they are passive observers of information. Whereupon my attitude about information is, I'm the source of it. I'm the source of gathering. It's my responsibility to gather that information. I mean, that's one of the reasons I attended the Straight Pride Parade. That's one of the reasons I went into journalism in the first place. That's one of the reasons I said, you know what, journalists actually don't know anything. I'm way more interested in specializing in U.S. foreign policy and national security, and I want to go into it from an academic perspective. I don't want to go into it as a journalist, because journalists really, they don't really have the endurance for any serious or real, you know, research. So with that in mind, off I went, and getting to experience, for example, the Straight Pride Parade, to literally watch journalists in real time rewrite what was actually going on. The sad part, it wasn't fascinating. The sad part, it wasn't even novel to me. It was exactly what myself and the organizers completely expected. In fact, I have the organizer on camera talking to about 5 reporters, telling them to their faces that you are going to go back to your studios as soon as you're done with this interview, and you are going to rewrite everything I said, and you're going to rewrite everything that happens here today in your own narrative. And I know you're going to do that. And they stood there and they stared at him and they blinked at him and they batted at him and they asked him all kinds of other manner of silly questions. And then they raced back to their offices and rewrote everything that happened that day. And
He's talking about John Hugo, by the way.
correct. That's who I'm talking about. Yeah. The lead organizer for the Straight Pride Parade. And I agreed, I mean, I knew that was going to happen as well. And I was glad to be there because I took, several hundred photographs of what was going on and what wasn't going on, and was able to report both firsthand, but also with record, AKA the images of what went on. I mean, I've had people argue with me about who was there, and I was able to deliver to them the actual images that I personally took to prove them that they were basically incorrect. And then they, had to back down out of, necessity, if anything. And then you mentioned this dynamic of what was going on here, that these were peaceful protesters, as I'm literally walking through smoldering rubble up on Melrose Avenue of buildings that were burned out the night before by the peaceful protesters carrying torches and bricks.
Right. And LA was like a big hot spot that was like literally fucking destroyed. It was like I'm watching these videos of people just getting beat the crap, like business owners getting their asses kicked. And don't you see CNN on the fucking ground? They don't ask these business owners. They don't care. No. That's the thing. It's just like I don't want to sound like I'm a crazy person. But it seems like the media is against the people. For some odd reason, they're run like China.
Well, in all fairness, Trump has made it very clear that the media is the enemy of the people, and the only people that protest that claim is the media itself. So you're absolutely correct. They've made it more than plain that they are literally the enemy of the people. When 8% of the population's interests politically are represented by the media in its entirety, we have 92% of the country that actually wants to go another direction. When we see the red versus blue voting across the country, there's only a smattering of blue around the edges. The rest of the country is deep red, and the media is quite reluctant to report that little tidbit factoid.
There was no blue rave. I'm watching the map. It was like red. It was like literally like fucking Mars. All right, it's just like I'm like, okay, I'm saying something totally different than what you guys are saying.
Did I miss the blue rave?
And it's just like, what is it? I feel like you guys remember the phenomenon of the blue dress. It was blue or gold.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's pretty much what I'm saying today. Like in America, it's like a split psyche between the two. Like we see us three, we're like, like you hear a lot of people like the BLM. Recently, I shared a video from The Cut, and they were like, what is white people superior at, right? And I don't know if you guys watch it, but it's like they brought in like a bunch of black people, and they were like, oh, white people, they smell like mayonnaise, or they love their dogs, and it was like really fun and cute. And then after a while, it just became really awful. Oh, they like to steal people's shit. And if you guys know, McCall's black, Melissa's husband's black, so it's like, I feel like they put the narrative for us, for the people of color, like they speak for us. And if McCall Jones share his video, his photo of him standing next to Milo Yiannopoulos, McCall just lost all his power. He's not black no more. Right. You know what I mean?
You know what's really funny that I've actually found very, very interesting about the left these days? I come from an era of the Afrocentric movement. Do you remember that, McCall?
Of course I do.
Afrocentric,
I'm old.
yes. You're old. So you already know.
I'm from the land of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X.
So I used to... The Afrocentric movement was to combat with... It was the polar opposite of the Eurocentric movement. They were meant to combat each other. I got into an argument with both of them all the time because they would always distort history. No, I'm blanking out. I know I was going somewhere with this.
I told you, that's rule number 2.
So what's interesting to me is that the liberals these days don't really quote Black authors anymore. Like,
No,
I grew up in the generation.
Black authors can't exist anymore for that.
Right. I just got done talking to somebody who was quoting a white, they were talking about white privilege, and they were talking about Peggy McIntosh. And I was like, you know, Peggy McIntosh stole that idea of white privilege, right? She didn't coin the phrase. You know who coined the phrase? W.E.B. Du Bois. He used white skin privilege. And white skin privilege was something very distinct. It was written into law. It was it occurred because of the slave codes, the Virginia slave codes, right? That's specifically what he was referring to. Peggy McIntosh stole that idea and distorted it into this idea of this thing that nobody can actually trace back. Right? It's this whole, well, you have privilege because somebody doesn't follow you around in a store. And that always surprises me that these leftists the Black leftists, the white leftists, everybody, they always want to empower Black people, but they cut out Black voices, the important Black voices. And then they give the credit, to white people. W.E. Du Bois, I am not a big fan of W.E. Du Bois. I don't like him. He was one of the first to start this whole Marxist ideology within the Black culture. I'm not a big fan of W.E. Du Bois, but to give credit of the idea of white privilege, to take it from Du Bois and give it to a white lady in the 70s, that kind of shows, like, I don't know how to explain. It shows the mindset of these liberals.
Like the conversation I had with I wouldn't say he's a Marxist. I would say he was more like a socialist, and he is. I'm not gonna say his name because he's from Nigeria. His family's from Nigeria, and he was talking about. He listened to my podcast episode where I talk about critical race theory is not your friend, and he goes, "You can't throw the bathwater." He was talking about white patriarchy and all that, good stuff, the jargons that they use, and I was like, "You forget that critical theory came from the Frankfurt School." A bunch of white dudes in Germany.
And you notice that a lot of these people talking about don't be with white men, and don't be with white women are with white women and white men themselves. Has anybody else noticed that but me? It was the same with the Afrocentric.
Absolutely.
It was the same with the Afrocentric. I would get in arguments with them all the time because I'd be like, aren't you with a white chick right now? Right? The same with, who are those guys that scream on corners about white people being evil?
I think it's like the Black Muslim Israelites, I think.
The Israelites? The Black Israelites?
Yeah.
Yep, all married to white women.
Are they?
A majority of them are married to white women.
It really
blows
my mind. It really blows my mind.
That's what amazes me. They hate white people so bad that they marry them. And they have kids with them. That's what amazes me. That whole aspect of it has always amazed me. All of my far left people I know are with white people.
Hey, I'm with a white dude.
But you're not far left.
Are you sitting here calling him evil and the scum of the earth?
When he doesn't take out the fucking trash.
So
admit it. Late at night when things are nice and hot, you're like, "Oh, you're such the scum of the earth, honey." I fucking hate you.
My brother-in-law was one of those Israelites, and he's still to a point where I'm sitting here like he has never been with a Black woman before, and I'm like, so when you sit there and call Black people evil, and you call Black people this and this and this, how do you think that makes your mixed daughter feel? How do you think that makes your wife feel? Like and the same thing with my older sister, far leftist, has mad crap to say about white people. I'm like, your niece and nephew are half white. Right? Yep. I mean, you're with a white man.
Right. Well, to zoom out on exactly your point a little bit, this goes to my rule number 2 to be a socialist is a despising of history, and what I mean by that is exactly what you're referring to, and what they do step by step is they introduce revisionist history. They start to revise what actually happened in favor of their own narratives. And in fact, I wrote a piece on Suzanne Venker's page this morning. And she was saying that if you are a supporter of BLM, you need to understand that BLM is not at all what you believe that it is. And that they are, race baiters more than they are doing anything. But what my comment basically boiled down to was I said, the number one product of Black Lives Matter is not so much this racist narrative as it is their number one product is actually revisionist history. Because if you listen to them and their rationale, it all boils down to exactly what Melissa's describing. It all boils down to some disparagement of some historical figure or some historical situation. But at the end of the day, once you actually do the research on it, you identify that disparagement is fundamentally untrue. So if you take a look at the claim, just like you said brother-in-law or so, to listen to the Black Lives Matter movement or the Black nationalist movement for that matter, is to believe the claim that all white people are racist. And to believe the claim that all white people are racist is a form of, or a chapter of, revisionist history. Because actual history makes it very clear that a large percentage of white people during slavery were adamantly opposed to slavery, and violently so. So I'm a direct descendant of John Brown. And John Brown is the most famous abolitionist historically in the United States. I've through DNA genetically identified, but I'm actually through blood connected to John Brown. So it's impossible for me to accept a revisionist version of John Brown, the most passionate, aggressive human being that I have ever researched, in terms of his singular vision for his entire life to utterly eliminate and decimate the institution of slavery in the United States. So for me to accept that all white people are racist, I then have to literally choose to believe in a lie that I 100% know is a lie. So I went down the list to describe how BLM and basically all Marxist movements are ultimately revisionist histories because, again, facts are inconvenient for their cause. In other words, just as you were saying, why, I worked on a project for a university out here, and the project was actually firsthand accounts of the latter part of the Great Migration. And the Great Migration is the movement of Black people moving from the South to more welcoming cities in the North. And it started, of course, with, Harriet Tubman is famous for being at the beginning of that movement. And then that movement proceeded to happen all up until, I believe, the mid to late 1950s. And since it was firsthand accounts, I found it fascinating that the people who were speaking, none of them saw themselves as victims. None of them saw themselves as powerless. None of them even communicated that they hated white people or in any way resented the situations that they were in. They just knew that the situations were wrong. They knew racism was wrong. They knew these institutions were wrong. But they never communicated this deep soul-based hatred. They never communicated that they were victims of this. They found themselves in difficult circumstances and just did their best to get around those circumstances. They didn't beg for government help. They just saw that reading and writing and education, the same way that Frederick Douglass encouraged us to do, was the actual key to get out. And these people went on to have fabulous careers. These people went on to overcome the racist institutions that had personally kept them out of jobs, had kept them out of schools, had kept them out of professions. But then ultimately they were able to persevere and ultimately were able to win. Without the help of government, without the help of all kinds of other counter-revolutions, and certainly without the help of critical race theory. So you have to hate history, which opens the door to basically being revisionists. And therein lay just another facet of why these movements are so not only dangerous, but ultimately even insidious.
Right.
I mean, you and if you really study history and you go far back enough, you have schools like Timbuktu. This idea, and this is the thing that I really hate about the left, is that they pretend like white people walked around, colonialized everything, and created everything. There was trade between all cultures. You've had the Silk Roads, right?
Yes.
The Timbuktu school, one of the most, they were teaching the Greeks and Romans stuff, right? So the first interactions between Europeans and Africans wasn't during the slave trade. You go back far enough in history, they had been trading for a while. The Nigerians, the Greeks referred to the Far East Africans or the Far West Africans off the slave coast as Nigerians. Nigers or something like that. That's how the N-word came about. A lot of people don't understand that.
Isn't the term nigga originally Greek, or was it Latin? Because
it was when it was either Greek or Roman. When they first encountered West Africans, they called them Niger, Niger. And the theory is, and this is just a theory of how it became the NIGG, whatever. The theory is that when that word finally traveled to America, that Southern accent added that extra G, and then it transformed from there.
I see.
So that's my understanding of how the word came about. My husband tends to study root words a lot, so I know a lot about root words.
There you go.
But colonialism is another thing. No, Europeans didn't go around destroying everything and conquering everything. A lot of these countries went to Europe and said, hey, can you protect me? Europe took advantage of it.
Right.
So this idea that the rest of the world was this powerless group of individuals against the smallest continent in the world is ridiculous. But you have to believe that in order to believe that revisionist history. I can go one after another. Silk Roads, if you really want to understand history, study the Silk Roads. Fascinating history. Shows you how cultures developed, how cultures intertwined. Study in Buddhism. In Buddhism doesn't talk evil about any religion except Islam. Islam is the only religion written in their book saying, be careful. And you can go back and study the Silk Roads and see what happened between the Buddhists and the Islams and understand why. So white people didn't dominate the world historically. They didn't even dominate the world in recent history. We're in the West, though. That's the difference.
And the revisionist history would be that European whites basically invented and then exported slavery. And slavery has existed long before that. And to your point, the era from a civilization timetable where Western Europe has dominated anything is minuscule compared to China,
the Middle East,
the
China,
Mongol, Middle East, Genghis Khan, I think is the current trendy way to say his name.
Right. Slavery dates back to the cradle of civilization, Mesopotami. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know how to pronounce it.
It sounds good. It sounds good.
Yeah, I think the point that us three are trying to make is that white people are not the only one that commit slavery, guys. Okay? That's what we're trying to say. Because you don't open books and read and pretty much understand the history of human civilization. And I said this in a recent podcast episode. If you want to overthrow the supposed white patriarchy, you're going to have to violate a lot of human rights to do so. Okay. And I don't understand this whole argument about oppression. We had so many people of color, quote unquote, came into power not too long ago. I feel like these people are the same fucking people who are waving their hands in gold in their banks and they're like, I'm poor. It's just I don't really understand this whole argument that they're making. So
you have to create a victim. That's what pisses me off. You have to have a victim.
It has to be a villain. You have to have a villain.
A villain and a victim and a superhero. Yeah. And that's what pisses me off about this new history that's being developed. Because I love history. I love studying history. And the stuff that are coming, I'm like, that's not what happened. That's literally not. How many people have ever actually heard of Timbuktu?
I haven't heard about it till now.
I have not heard that story.
Timbuktu was it was located, and I'm forgetting which country in Africa it was located. It was one of the first universities developed in the world. They traded the Greek philosophers went to study at Timbuktu. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of the Greek knowledge came from, as far as philosophy goes, is from Timbuktu.
Isn't Timbuktu in Mali?
Is that where it is? I'm not sure exactly where it is. Yeah. But it was one of the first universities, and it was one of the greatest universities ever developed. Came out of Africa. Yeah. So this idea, and in order to make this revisionist history work, Africa had to be in the Dark Ages, sitting there in tribes with what are they called, the grass grass dresses with spears, right? That in order to make that's where Africa had to be in order to be conquered. No saying, hey, you know what? Africans were very involved in the slave trades. Mm-hmm. They conquered each other and sold each other.
Harris family.
But that's what irks me, is that you can't empower people by making everybody. What it says is the human race can be good and we can be evil.
Right.
Period.
And that's what I was trying to say. Like, if you want you have to hold human civilization accountable. Period. We're all guilty of something. I mean, that's like holding me accountable for my dad's action. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And if I say that to a white person, like a white liberal Karen, for example, I was like, will you hold me accountable for the Khmer Rouge atrocities? She's like, oh, heavens, no. Then why the fuck are you going to hold white people who pretty much all the original slave owners are dead? They're not. They no longer exist. So that's pretty much talking about the reparations and et cetera.
Nobody wants to talk about the current slave trade in Africa.
No.
That's an untouchable subject.
Yeah, and nobody wants to talk about fucking China, guys. You guys voted Biden in.
Nobody wants to talk about the never again until China's doing it. Right?
The never again dynamic fell apart immediately. I mean, I wrote extensively about the Rwanda, disaster of never again, but then every genocide since then has been completely ignored by the UN. Right. So the never again dynamic was very short lived.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the United Nations, they want to go to California and be like, this is a human rights violation under the Trump administration. But,
whatever.
Look at China.
To my understanding, to my understanding about Never Again has been misrepresented. Never Again was never supposed to be about actual genocides. It's about ensuring another world war never happened. That's what the never again phrase, that's why the UN was created. The idea was to build trade relationships so we would never see a World War III.
But see,
it had nothing to do specifically with genocide.
There's a fallacy right there, that there is this commonly held premise that trade suppresses the possibility of war. Right. But reality, however, speaks otherwise, that Hitler had a very vigorous trade with Stalin. Invaded the Soviet Union anyway. I believe, actually, I don't want to start guessing, but was not the U.S. and Japan trading at the time during World War II? Mm-hmm.
Yes, they were.
Was Japan not purchasing oil from America and probably a few other places?
This is during World War II?
Prior to World War II, that is.
Right. Let me see. And let me do googly goo.
All right.
You guys
so all those things were actually happening. Never Again was about trade with European countries.
Okay.
That's the truth of the matter. Never Again was meant to be a European thing.
Right.
Because Never Again happened in Bretton Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Bretton Woods 1944, if I remember correctly. It was Bretton Woods 1944 when the UN and the IMF was created.
Yeah.
That was all part of the Never Again movement. It was
Good old
really
Jekyll
there.
Island.
There was no Eastern countries involved in Brentwood. In the beginning, it was only Western countries. Eastern countries didn't get involved, I think, until like the 1960s is when the first Eastern country got involved, if I remember correctly.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So Never Again initially was supposed to be about European countries and trade within European countries. I agree with you that trade is not the fix-all.
Mm-hmm.
That was the belief at the time. The Bretton Woods completely fell apart during the Vietnam War. So it was gone during the Vietnam War. Then we fell into the petrodollar. So
I was just going to say, I mean, this is of Nixon's doing by taking basically the world economy ultimately off the gold standard and introducing oil as the reserve currency. So yeah, exactly.
Yep. So Never Again fell apart with the petrodollar. Now we're still on the petrodollar system, which, by the way, Boone, if you don't know, is the real reason why we're in the Middle East, which is bullshit. And that goes back to Biden and Kamala, and that's what pisses me off. Because one of the reasons why, perfect leadway, because one of the major reasons why I voted for Trump was because of his foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to tie the U.S. dollar back to exports.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the big push for the manufacturing jobs, the getting rid of a lot of the red tape, the making it more expensive to import rather than export. That's the tariffs, all of that. It was a push to tie the U.S. economy or the U.S. dollar back to export so we can take it off the petrodollar and we could get out of the freaking Middle East.
Mm-hmm. I still remember when I was in middle school when they, Bush, they went into, the Middle East. Right. And if you guys look at the picture of Bush signing to take on Iraq, you guys see who? Biden. He's in the picture too.
That's
exactly
McCain.
Right. Carter Doctrine. Mm-hmm. They all support the Carter Doctrine. Yep. They were all around when the Carter Doctrine was created, probably. When the Carter Doctrine was created in 1980 something. When did Biden become senator? 1970?
Mid-70s, yeah.
Yeah. So Biden was in office when the Carter Doctrine was created. Mm-hmm. The Carter Doctrine is what gives us permission to go into the Middle East whenever the hell we want.
Mm-hmm. And people misunderstand that, as in spite of Jimmy Carter's peacenik and peace-loving, public demeanor, Carter was involved in more military adventures than basically at the time all of the Republican presidents, combined. And people have no memory of this, at all. And that's why when I say, when we spoke, you and I, Boone, last time spoke about this. I mean, I couldn't stop about how much has been forgotten, by the culture, and they're willing to believe the stories. We spoke specifically about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which, in terms of who's claiming that, oh my goodness, wrongdoing is a conspiracy theory. Well, the term conspiracy theory literally came out of the Gulf of Tonkin incident when people realized that the U.S. ultimately manufactured the story that they were attacked by Vietnamese ships, which was the excuse or the fire point of the Vietnam War for the United States. So yeah, it is viscerally frustrating for me to listen to people who are so adamantly against or something or for something, and then the instant I ask them a question, they are devoid of all knowledge of the actual situation. I mean, something so simple as, well, for example, probably the most common one that you both have heard quite frequently is, Trump broke laws.
What about him? What about him? I think that's what it is.
What laws did he break?
Yeah.
What laws did he break?
Well, the whataboutism is, in my view, a separate phenomenon, right? Because, but we can cover that one as well. But yeah, it's like, well, what laws did he break? Well, don't verbatim. I've spoken to hundreds of people in the past 4 years, and the answer has been verbatim, which is pretty telling. Well, what? Can't you see?
He's destroying America.
I finish people's arguments for them now. I'm like, oh, you mean when he did this and when he did that? Pull up the video. Here, let me, I'm so sick. I ask people, this is what's messed up. I constantly ask people, they're like, why would you vote for Trump? Foreign policy. Number one reason.
5 Nobel Peace Prize nominations.
Yep.
Ended multiple wars. Peace deals coming out of his butt.
Screw everything else. Foreign policy, peace deals. Right? I'm international development. Foreign policy, peace deals. Screw everything else. I would have voted for Tulsi because she basically had the same stance. Right?
Yep.
I asked them, why are you voting for Biden? Because Trump sucks.
Correct.
Yep.
And, I got to, without mentioning Trump, why are you voting for Biden?
I've asked that question too. They can't do it. I can screenshot conversations I've had without saying Trump's name. Why are you voting for Biden?
Because I hate Trump.
They can't do it.
Yeah, they
Fuck
can't.
that Cheeto man.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, McCall.
Oh, I was just going to add that I went from thinking it was just frustrating to realizing how dangerous it actually is. That so many people are of this profound level of ignorance and indifference to what's actually going on. To know that Trump has led the arrest of more than 20,000 pedophiles and human sex traffickers in the past 4 years goes completely ignored. The fact that he made permanent federal monies that go to historically Black colleges and universities from an annually reviewed, action to it being permanently in place is completely ignored. And the list goes on. And they just, when I mention those things, they just stare at me and get really angry. And I've actually lost really close friends, as a result of that. And I can't say that I mind it, but it was, in some cases, it was actually rather sad and frustrating, because I, really respected and or appreciated these folks, even though, they hated, capitalism, and history and didn't understand economics.
You know what's really the funniest part to me is that all these people voting for Biden and for Harris pushing environmental greener energy. And my question always is, how are we going to do that when our interest is in oil? We're going to push for greener as long as the U.S. economy and the global economy is tied to the petrodollar. There will never be a push for greener energy.
That's right.
Nope.
Period.
Nope. I mean, in California, we invested so much in green energy that
it's BS bullshit. I'm talking about real green energy. I'm not talking about windmills that are run by oil.
Right.
Okay.
They require oil to set up.
Right.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about that. So, we're going to make a theory, so we're going to wrap it up. But I wanted to bring out what you guys think, what the theory of a Biden and Harris administration. So I'm going to go back to 2015. So I'm talking about the Obama and Biden administration. So I got this information from Anti-Empire, which I'm going to link down below. All our resources are going to be linked down below, so you guys can go and fact check us. But I want to read a paragraph that's pretty interesting, and I think you two can add to it. And you guys can interject anytime. The Saudi-led war on Yemen began in March 2015, and the Obama-Biden administration initiated U.S. participation. Under Obama, the United States provided direct intelligence support, refueled Saudi warplanes, helped the coalition identify bomb targets, and expedite weapons shipment. But beyond this direct military participation, the Biden administration gave the war political cover and shielded the coalition from the most modest scrutiny of the United Nations. Under the Obama administration, it was no mystery that this war was unleashing horrors on the people of Yemen. The coalition bombed a center for the blind, a funeral, a wedding, a factory, and countless homes and residential area, and blockade Yemen's port, cutting off vital food and medical shipment. All while the Obama administration was in power. Indeed, the Obama White House was so complicit in war crimes in Yemen that its own State Department internally warned key U.S. military personnel could be subject to war crimes prosecution, according to Reuters' investigation, which they used to do journalism, by the way, published in October 2016. By July 2015, a United Nations official was already warning that Yemen was on the verge of a famine, a premonition that horrifically it came true. So the Yemen genocide. So guys who are listening who are left wing who voted for Biden, there you go. It's like, there you go. You guys voted a fucking warmonger back into power.
Well,
did you guys see his administration?
Yes.
Yeah. These guys are like fucking the establishment. These are the same people.
They're not
by the way.
just the establishment. They are. Most of them were involved in the Middle East conflict.
Correct. That's exactly right.
It's amazing to me. It's like, look. I'm not always the smartest cookie in the room. Okay, I totally understand it. But even I know about the genocide that happened. It's a humanitarian crisis that's happening right now in Yemen that it started by the same fucker you voted back into power. I don't get it. I don't get these socialists. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. It blows my brain. Like, I really don't get it. So any information that we just said right now, like I said, I'm going to link it down below. But what do you guys think, the Biden Harris? Are we going to go to another war? Is everything going to be nice and beautiful and,
Well, if we take Biden's statement at face value that the U.S. is back and we're going back to our previous set of values, there's only one definition if you've been awake for the past 100 years. And that means we're going back to war. We are going back to investing in the exploitation of foreign oil and foreign workers for sure, that we're going back to supporting genocides and overthrowing democratically elected governments. That's what it looks like for the U.S. to be back on the block. And if anybody who disagrees with that, it is only evidence of their complete ignorance of the history of the United States. And their disdain of history and fact, because those facts, as you just described in the paragraph that you just read, with Obama's support of the Saudi attack on Yemen, only underscores your point, and the fact that anybody who disagrees with that is ignorant. And in fact, I say openly that they're disdainful of facts and history and reality. Because people are, by and large, ignorant of the policies, both domestically and foreign policy of the Obama administration. And I call them out on it. And no one has ever challenged me because they are unable to challenge me. They haven't spent any second. He was black and they voted for him, and that was the extent of their interest. And actually, one of the things I did have a conversation recently about exactly this with a friend of mine who I actually have a lot of respect for intellectually, meaning I respect his intellect. And what he identified was that, because basically we've been having this conversation for 4 years. And when the Russiagate thing first began, prior to the election, and it began to rage right after the election, I said to him, he goes, you'll trust Trump no matter what. And I said, absolutely not. I said, these claims are being made, but I said, I've yet to see any evidence that these claims are true. And all I'm doing is asking, if not demanding, to see some evidence that these claims are true. It's in my view, not an unreasonable position for me to have. But follow that same logic 4 years later. I became the absolute enemy of the state, if you will, or the enemy of the status quo, because I demanded to see the evidence. And then when the evidence ultimately appeared, it demonstrated that literally nothing had gone on. And then their story becomes, well, it depends on who you believe. I mean, can we believe that they actually didn't find any evidence? I'm like, well, the official report says, and that's all I have to go on. The official report says there was absolutely no evidence. So what I began to recognize from what he was describing was that there's two presidencies that people follow. There's the presidency in front of the cameras behind the microphones, and there's the presidency that happens in terms of foreign policy, economic policy, domestic policy, social policy, that happens in terms of policy that is set specifically by the administration, that basically the people that only gather their information from the microphones and cameras are completely not only unaware of, but they're actually disinterested in those other things. I kept asking him, I said, well, Are you aware of 5 Nobel Peace Prizes? Are you aware of the Dear Colleagues letter, which stripped men of their constitutional protections to A, know what they're being accused of, to face their accuser, and have the right to defend themselves, stripped of college men, obviously, who were accused of sexual related crimes on college campuses. That direct violation of the Constitution occurred under the Obama administration. These people know nothing about that. His response consistently was, well, I don't doubt that this is true, but I don't know anything about that. What I care about is that Trump mocked a physically impaired person or mentally impaired person. He said that he sexually assaults women. He said that he called the troops losers and failures. And I said, well, but none of those things were reported as such. And and I cited that. I said, well, I have looked into the soldiers are losers quote, and all 4 people, or each of the 4 people that made that claim, will not go on the record to support that claim. Secondly, all the people who refute that claim have been willing to go on the record to refute that claim. And John Bolton being one of them, well known for not being a fan of Donald Trump, said, A, I was there, and B, that didn't happen. And even when I wasn't there, I don't suspect that Donald Trump would have ever said that. Mm-hmm. This is somebody who has no stake in, ever saying anything positive or even true for that matter about Donald Trump. And he, in a sense, defended, that he doesn't believe that Donald Trump would in any way disparage the troops. And Donald Trump himself has done amazing things for the troops and is amazingly well supported, by the troops. So it clarified for me that these people have no interest in actual policies. They're just concerned about how they feel about what is said from the podium. Yeah. And along those standards, they were just as ignorant of Obama's administration, what Obama did, but they were pleased and, in fact, impressed and, in fact, comforted by everything that Obama said in his smooth tan suit, from the microphone. And they could not have cared less about his actual policies.
And I remember the debate between Trump and Biden when Trump confronted Biden and he said, who built those cages, Biden? Who built those cages? He was talking about Obama. And the Biden administration is going to hire the same woman who was very strict about the immigration policy. And she, I think Democracy Now! Reported that. And they said, this is the same woman that was really rough, during that period of time. So, we are in the middle of information war. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us individually and, especially this podcast to come on and talk about stuff like this. So hopefully we don't go to war. I'm just hoping I'm pessimistic that we're not going to be. Mm-hmm.
We'll be in a conflict again soon.
My thesis is that we'll be in a conflict immediately. My premise is that we'll be in a conflict immediately.
Yeah. No. Biden, they have to first implement the 25th. And Kamala has to become president before we go into conflict again.
Well, that's right. But I also believe that that's going to happen immediately as well.
Mm-hmm. Right? And then we're going to have our...
That's going to be 6 months. They can't do it right away.
I'll bet you $1.
And like I said, and I hope you guys really it opened your eyes. And I like I said, I respect my left leaning friends, and I totally understand where you guys are coming from. I mean, of course, us 3, we're not against civil rights, we're not against human rights, we're not against any of that. We just want you to understand where we're coming. Things. Yeah, we're for all those things. We're not
for the people that are claim they're for those things and actually aren't for those things.
Us 3, we're not fucking boogaloo boys and girls. We're not out there destroying anything. We just want the truth. And like I said, we are in the middle of an information war. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this conversation. So I'm going to link both their information down below so you guys can invite them onto your podcast if you guys want to, because I love these two very intelligent people. So anything else you guys want to add before we sign off?
Well, I'd like to throw out just a perfect case in point. because basically Biden's cabinet, his intended cabinet, let's call it, is full, as you said before, of establishment, like ultra establishment, I actually call them people, neocons, bankers, financiers. And I wanted to just illustrate one specific case. Now, Joe Biden's current pick for Secretary of State is diplomat Antony Blinken. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that these people are not only establishment, but they were in the Obama administration. And we all recognize that photograph when I believe when I think bin Laden had been caught or killed, with everyone sitting in the war room with Obama looking very sternly at the monitors, Secretary of State, Vice President. Well, in that photograph as well, in the background, is Antony Blinken. So that only underscores your point that these people are not only establishment, but they're actually part of the Obama machine, right? So to put a case in point is that Blinken is actually well known for being an absolute advocate of regime change where he believes it's necessary. So he's an absolute supporter of going to war wherever we have to. So anybody who believes that Biden and his administration has anything to do with being peace-loving, being human-loving, being humanity-loving is sadly and deeply mistaken. And the most common phrase that I hear these days is, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe Biden did that." And the only reason that they say that is because they're 100% ignorant of who Biden is, what he has done, and ultimately what he intends to do. So I sit back and I go, "Oh, really? Isn't that funny?"
Right.
Melissa?
I think a big thing people have to remember is that when Trump said, "Make America Great Again," like I said earlier, it was about bringing manufacturing. It was about tying exports to the dollar again. So we can he was prepping to get us out of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. He was prepping to take take us off dependence on the petrodollar. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing. And now that Biden is in office, all that is down the drain. And that's what sucks the most for me. Because I am actually truly a humanitarian. I look at people in Syria, I look at people in the Middle East, and they remind me of our people.
Right.
You know what I mean? They've suffered
She's talking about Cambodian people. Yeah.
They've suffered enough. Now it's time for us to pull out of the Middle East. And and I keep telling people, we were so close to getting there. We were so close. When Trump said, "Make America Great Again," he meant specifically untying, in my opinion, he meant untying the US dollar from the petrodollar and tying it back to exports. Right. So we weren't dependent. There was so much good that would have come out of that. Peace deals. Not only that, I am truly an environmentalist too. But I understand that as long as we have an interest in oil, the green energy I'm looking for will never exist. And I'm not talking about windmills that run on oil. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about true green energy. I'm talking about looking at really honing in on nuclear energy, really hone these different types, harnessing solar energy, harnessing energy from the sun. That type of energy will never actually be researched as long as the U.S. economy is tied to oil. We will never have a greener energy source. Our footprint will be the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So all of these things that you guys are advocating for, you just voted an establishment back into power for another 4 years of the same crap because you hated the orange man.
Yep. And to let you guys know that to assume or to say that, Joseph Biden's going to bring you guys peace is like saying Henry Kissinger is an angel. Okay? So I really, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And as always, guys, stay far out.